So we added Babel in the last lecture. Let's now also support CSS files and images. For that, I'll add a new rule, and I want to start with CSS. So we test for files ending with .css. That's our simple test. I also want to exclude anything in node modules here, just to be safe. And then we can define which type of loader we want to use here. Now for CSS, I actually need a more complex setup. For JS, we also have a quite complex setup, but that's all handled through Babel and our Babel config. For CSS, we'll configure it here in the webpack config file. So instead of loader, I can use here. That's the long form. Loader is the very short form if we just want to set up a loader without any config. If we want to set up multiple loaders or a loader with config, we should use here. It takes an array of the loaders we want to apply. And here, I now want to install two loaders. I'll do that with npm install --save -dev. And I need the CSS loader, which basically tells Webpack what to do with these .css imports, and the style loader. That's a loader which will then extract the CSS code from the CSS files and inject it at the top of our HTML file, hence reducing the amount of file downloads we have to make. So I'll install both here, and now I want to add them, of course. For that, in my use array, I'll add a JavaScript object which has a loader property again, where I define the style loader. It's followed, and the order does matter here, by another object with a loader, the CSS loader. Now important, and this is easy to mess up, Webpack parses loaders in this use array and applies them from right to left, so from bottom to top if we write it like this. So it first takes the CSS loader, which it should, because that makes it understand these CSS imports and don't throw an error. And then it applies the style loader on the extracted CSS code. And that's exactly the order we need here. Now we can also give the CSS loader, which is responsible for parsing and handling the CSS, another property, which is called options. Now options is a JavaScript object where we can configure this loader. Now here, I want to set modules to true to enable CSS modules, and I'll set up the local ident name to define how the generated CSS classes due to CSS modules should look like. And here I'll take the name of the class we defined, two underscores, then the module name, so the component name, and then a hash to really have unique names. This is the same setup we added in the styling module to the configuration create React app gave us. We're not done with CSS though. I also want to add auto prefixing. And for this, I'll install another package with --save -dev, post CSS loader. Now, post CSS sounds like it does something to CSS after we parsed it. Here, it'll actually run before the CSS loader, dive into the CSS file, and adjust our code before CSS loader pulls it out and adjusts the class names and so on. The post CSS loader simply is a loader which allows us to transform the CSS. For example, we could also use post CSS loader to handle Sass and stuff like this. Here, however, I will simply add it as another loader, and therefore in third position because it should run before the CSS loader. Here I will set up my loader, which is post CSS loader, and I need to set up my options on that loader with the options key, where I now want to set the ident option. That's important internally here, but more important are the plugins. That actually takes a function which returns an array, and these are now steps we should apply or we want to apply to transform everything. And here I want to run auto prefixer. Now auto prefixer needs to be installed. It's a separate tool. So I'll run npm install --save -dev auto prefixer. That's a third-party library which is able to auto prefix our CSS properties. We need to import it into the config file, so I'll create a new const auto prefixer, which uses the required syntax to import auto prefixer. like this. Now with that import added, we can add this to the plugins array here. So here I'll add auto prefixer, and this is actually a function we need to execute, and we pass a JavaScript object to it to configure it, and there again we pass a list of browsers. So browsers is a list, and we can take the list we set up in Babel RC. That's the browser list I want to support. I'll just paste it into the browsers list for the auto prefixer. So now we prefix CSS as required for these browsers we support, and it will automatically figure out which browsers these are for us. That's the bare minimum setup I want to use. Now, since we run one additional loader before CSS loader, we actually need to inform CSS loader about that. That's just a special setup CSS loader needs. So there, I'll add import loaders and set this to 1, because we run one loader before CSS loader is applied. And that's our CSS handling setup. Should be fine. We'll soon see if it works. With that, let's continue, and let's make sure that we now also can handle images, since we also import these.